Good morning. 3.4, that's the number of reported breaches each and every day. 48, the number of cyber criminals on the FBI most wanted list today. 60%, we heard that in the last panel, 60% of small business who experience a cyber breach go out of business in 6 months. 26% of small to mid-sized business has a cyber insurance policy, only 26%. And another interesting number, you can tell I like numbers, 3.6 and 7.9. $3.6 million around the world to recover from a cybersecurity breach. In the United States, the average cost of a cyber breach is $7.9 million. These are reading glasses, so I want to look at your faces. Yeah, I want to get your attention. This is a very important topic, and we're going to talk about some practical ways to remediate some of the vulnerabilities that you may have in your organization. Today, I am not the expert. We have 4 distinguished colleagues here who actually work in cyber and information security each and every day. From your left, Judith Germano, founder of Germano Law and a distinguished fellow at New York University Center for Cybersecurity. Kevin O'Brien, the CEO and co-founder of Greathorn, whose products protect against email threats. And Roger Grimes, a veteran computer security consultant, writer, teacher, who describes himself as a data-driven defense evangelist for KnowBe4 Inc., a firm that provides security awareness training. And some of you may know Andrea Hogan, president and CEO of Merchant Metals, one of the largest manufacturing and distribution companies of fence systems. Now, please, this is an interactive, so we really want to do a first polling question. So take out your devices, and we're going to ask the first question. Has your company ever experienced a cyber breach or a cyber attack? It's simple, yes or no. If you could be truthful, we would appreciate it, but we want to get at least 200 attendees up in the upper right-hand corner. We only have 29, 32. Let's keep those answers coming in, please. Right now, for our panelists, so you know, it's like, what's the answer? It's 68% of the audience says they have, and 33% say they have not, with about 56 people participating. So we're going to keep an eye on that, and it's very interesting. I always have the question when I talk to clients, if you say no, I'm going to ask you, how do you know you haven't been breached? And that's sort of the mic drop. You really want to think about, how do you know if you've been breached or not? Still 65% say they have. It's amazing. If I asked this question 5, 7 years ago, people wouldn't admit that they had a cyber breach, or they wouldn't have even known. Okay, so let's go to our panelists and identify some risks today. Judy, what do you see as some of the risks that you face on a daily basis?
I think that the biggest risk that we're seeing right now is just not being prepared. I had the same question, Karl, for the 33% no. I wanted to say, are you sure? Because so often we find out that companies are actually being compromised, but they don't have the right testing and plans and systems in place to even realize it. And the perpetrators can be on your system siphoning off information for years without being detected. So it's critically important to be prepared, and what that means is on the technological risk and threats, but also the legal and civil concerns, the regulatory concerns and civil liability risks. So I would say a top concern is not being prepared. My other 2 top ones I would say in terms of risk is understanding, just getting your own company in order is a large enough challenge, but you have to look beyond the four corners of your enterprise and think about your supply chain and throughout what third parties have sensitive data or critical access to either your systems or your operations or your information or information of your customers that you have been entrusted to protect. So you want to think about that as a major risk. And then the last one I would add to my top three for the day is the risk in the growing concerns globally with regard to how we handle privacy and information, because it's a very complex regulatory landscape in the United States and then also globally. And it's important to understand those risks so that when an incident occurs, you can pivot quickly to make sure that you're legally compliant, as well as trying to stop the current technological threat that's occurring.
Great, thank you. And third-party vendor risk is, someone mentioned it earlier about Target and Fazio Mechanical. Fazio Mechanical was a small HVAC company attached to Target to share invoices. Long story short, they pulled down 43 million credit cards. It cost Target $292 million. They had $100 million in cyber insurance. Kevin, what do you see as some of the risks today?
Let me start with a different question. So in the audience here, raise your hand if you are a dedicated cybersecurity professional, if that's all you do.
I don't see
There will
any.
be no hands have gone up, right? So I typically speak at conferences where we're having conversations about cybersecurity to cybersecurity professionals. And there's a different understanding when you're talking to an audience like that. The largest risk, and I want to pick up something that was just said, is that cybersecurity is about the amalgamation and the confluence of people, process, and technology. And to do that well, for an organization to address their risk, you have to be thinking about an entire range of different parts of a cybersecurity framework. Most organizations do not do this well, or they do it in an incomplete manner. And at least half of the fault for that lies with vendors. And I come from the vendor side of the world and have been there for 20 years. There is a lot of shiny new object selling that happens in this space. But your risk is going to come from the one area that you didn't secure or you didn't think about. So if you're not walking into that conversation with profound knowledge and background of where all of those frameworks lie, about how you're going to address insider threat, technological investment and deployment, or process to ensure that you don't have a breach or somebody stealing information, that's really where the risk comes from. And the vendor community, although the vendor community can help you, they may not be in a position to be able to address risk for you if you don't know what to ask for.
Okay, great, thank you. And Roger, what do you see as some risks today that we're facing?
So I've been doing computer security for 32 years, written 10 books, and I'm a data-driven defense evangelist. My last book was called Data Driven. I'm all about the data. So I've been looking into why people are attacked, successfully hacked for at least 2 decades. I've helped do security incidents on anywhere from dozens to over 100 companies each year for the last 20 years. And there's lots of ways you can be attacked. It can be social engineering, unpatched software, eavesdropping, insider attack, all kinds of things. But when I look at the data for the last 7 years, it comes down to really 2 things that comprises 99% of your risk, and that is social engineering and unpatched software. So there's all these ways that you and your company could be compromised, but I guarantee you, with very few exceptions, even everybody in this room that said they were compromised, it probably happened because of some social engineering email, possibly a phone call or something like that, or unpatched software. Social engineering and phishing accounts for 70 to 90% of all successful malicious data breaches by itself. Unpatched software between 20 to 40%, and sometimes they're mixed together. You get an email and it has some type of, you're not patched in some way, and so it compromises you. But think about that, that's pretty amazing. That means that if you and your company successfully address 2 causes, social engineering and unpatched software, you're getting rid of 90 to 99% of your risk. And if you don't address those things, the rest doesn't really even matter. I mean, you can be compromised for something that's not because of that, an insider threat Or one time, a long time ago, I was with a company that was SQL injection, so they had some bad code and that sort of stuff. But the vast majority of it is two things. And that changes over time. I've been doing this 32 years. It used to be that it was all, DOS viruses and macro viruses. And then for a long time, it was unpatched software was the major contributor. As a matter of fact, it was one unpatched program for 7 years. Oracle Java, unpatched Java, was responsible for 90% of all malicious data breaches by itself. And if you added in Adobe Acrobat and Reader and Flash, that got you to 99%. But now all the software is starting to be patched kind of better. And so the attackers have moved on to social engineering and phishing as their number 1 cause. And maybe in the future, 5 or 10 years from now, it's going to be cloud security breaches, IoT, Internet of Things security breaches. I mean, they're already starting to trickle in that way. But if you really want to ask me how you should best concentrate on protecting yourself, you'd be crazy not to concentrate on doing a better job of fighting social engineering and phishing and a better job of patching. And last year there were 16,555 software vulnerabilities announced. Only 10 of those were used against most companies. So you really don't have to patch 16,000 things. You only have to do a better job at patching 10 things. The browser, add-in helpers, and the operating system. And if it's a server, the web server software, and the database software, and the management software. So again, what I would want to communicate to y'all, because nobody else is going to tell you this, 2 things are almost all the risk to most organizations and at you at home. And if you fight those things better, it's the best thing you can do.
Thank you very much. Just to comment on that, everyone here, you have a firewall in your organization, correct? Yes. But are you aware of the human firewall? That's your employee. That's the contractor who has access to your network. Let's say you have 300 people in your organization. You don't just have one firewall, you have 300 human firewalls. They are the weakest link. As Roger's saying, when you talk about social engineering and phishing, that's going to shore up your human firewall. Another thing, questions, you can send in any questions you want, and we're going to have time at the end to answer them. Andrea, how about you? You're here with the case study. Why don't you share some of the risks that your own organization faced?
Sure. So you've heard the first panel this morning, and all of these panelists here talk about middle market companies being slow on the uptake to protect themselves against these threats. So I'm here to represent all of those companies. We go to market in 40 buildings across the United States. We have about 750 employees. And in February of 2017, we fell victim to a phishing attack that saw 100% of our employee W-2 forms were stolen and sold on the dark web. That attack drove an imperative to significantly improve IT security across the business. And it also, I found out later, made us more vulnerable to future attacks because all of our information and lots of links to our company were now out there for the bad guys to access. So we did a penetration test, we bought some more insurance, we put some more products in place, but it wasn't enough. On October 1st, 2018, completely unknown to us, one of our associates clicked on a Microsoft Word document. It had an enticing title. It was Weekly Payroll. That one click was all it took. That document contained malicious code that launched TrickBot. That product is considered a banking Trojan, and it has task modules that do very, very specific things in a very automated way. It establishes a foothold in your system. It propagates to other computers on your network. It steals user credentials, and it can place other viruses in the environment. Over the course of 30 days, again, unbeknownst to us, this TrickBot established a presence in 90 computers and a half dozen of our servers. It obtained our administrators' credentials, and on Halloween, must have had a sense of humor, launched the Ryuk ransomware on 35 of our PCs and 15 critical servers. They were at once encrypted and unusable. Within 2 hours, we shut down the tunnels to our cloud applications. We notified our insurance carrier. We engaged counsel, and we began what would become a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day effort around investigation, recovery, and stakeholder communication. We were completely dark. On the advice of experts, we did not pay the ransom, as we were told that with this particular ransomware, payment of the ransom only resulted in the free up of your data about 60% of the time. We were also informed that our network was complex enough that maybe the bad guys didn't know what else they had harmed. So even with the best of intent to give us back our PCs and our servers, that may not have occurred. But the incident and the recovery and the new security came at a significant cost to our business. We're going to talk a little bit later about some things we've done as part of our overall security effort, but it was great to hear what you just said, because I will tell you just 3 things would have taken our recovery period from 7 days to maybe a day and a half, and here they are. The field computer should not have administrative rights. I know it's very convenient for people to set up a new printer or be able to do things that you can do with administrative rights, but that's why this virus was able to propagate so quickly to so many computers. It's one of the key reasons. Secondly, we did backups. We had absolute backups of every key system, except we didn't routinely test them. And 2 key backups didn't restore, and those servers had to be completely rebuilt. And then finally, we were not rigorously installing software updates and patches, which you just heard as being a huge issue. So while we've taken a lot of steps around network monitoring and email filtering and user education, the fact of the matter is, had we had these 3 things in place firmly in the business, this would have been a little bit more, more of a blip than the 7-day crisis that it was.
Thank you. It takes a lot for the CEO of a company to come and air dirty laundry in front of all of you. So I really appreciate learning from Andrea and the case study. So we had a little primer. We understand what some of the risks are. You heard about some of the risk in the last panel. Now let's get down to the nitty gritty, as we say in New Jersey. How do we remediate vulnerabilities, the common vulnerabilities that are found in organizations? Andrea, you just gave a few. Are there any more that you want to touch on before we ask the rest of the panel?
So this isn't necessarily a risk mitigator, but I can't overstate how important getting cyber insurance coverage is. The folks that are in that business and are knowledgeable can provide you with some tools. They can hook you up with experts that you may not be able to vet or become knowledgeable about on your own. I would say our initial carrier was fantastic in that regard. It was the reason we were able to mobilize as quickly as we were. Our new carrier, even more so, because they're exclusively focused in this area. And I do think one of the most simple things that we got with our email filtering software is just a simple notification on every email that comes in from the outside. So if it's not from one of us, if it's not from a merchant's metals person, it says this is an externally generated email, and you should be suspicious of it. Mm-hmm. So there's 2.
Okay, 2 are good, and you gave us 3 others, so you're up to 5. Thank you very much. You get the rest of the day off.
Thank you.
Roger, how about you? What are some classic remediation steps that the audience can take back to their organization and help shore up their security program?
So I work for a firm that does helping people, educate people about social engineering, so I can certainly speak about that. But again, on patching, be better on your patching, but also be particularly better on your patching around your internet browser and operating systems on your workstations and on the servers. Again, it's web server software almost exclusively, followed by database software, followed by the management software that the IT group uses to manage it. But in social engineering, my company has found great success. We've got lots of data. It's across 22,000 different customers now, tens of millions of individual customers, that if you not only educate them, but also do that simulated phishing test. So that's where you send out an email that you want to see how many people can be tricked into clicking on an attachment or responding with logon credentials or something. Across the board, every company that does that for the first time, the number of employees that respond to a simple fake phish, a phish that any of us should be able to recognize as a fake email, is somewhere between 27 and 33% on average, most companies. So a third of your workforce can be tricked fairly easily. Once you start educating them and maybe sending them a simulated phishing email once a month or once a quarter or something like that, along with education, almost every company within a year gets that down to 2%. I mean, that's a pretty, and I've been in the IT computer security world for over 3 decades, and I can't think of any other thing you can do that can so significantly decrease your risk in a measurable way that you can see. It's a pretty incredible thing. And the other thing I would say is you definitely want to not only send out general phishing tests, like the number one phishing email that gets most people is a free donut at Dunkin' Donuts. Don't know why, but everybody must love the donuts. And for a while, we'd tell people, hey, that email doesn't exist, it's always fake. But then Dunkin' Donuts started doing advertising campaigns in email and really muddied up the water. But also around tax time, so between January and February and April, you start testing people that might have access to W-2s, like in your payroll department or finance department. You send an email saying if they could be tricked into giving out W-2 information, or could employees of themselves be tricked into sending an email giving up their W-2 information. And then around Christmas time, you send out kind of fake Christmas phishing emails or Thanksgiving. So the idea is that you want to send out, when you're testing and educating your employees, testing them on real world phishes that they're likely to get. You want to phish your employee first as a test. Don't let the real phisher be the person, the cyber hacker criminal, be the first time that your employee is tested if they're going to respond correctly or not. And years ago, a lot of companies used to be afraid to do these simulated phishing tests. These days, it's really, really normal. So if your company's CEO or something like that is a little bit hesitant to do these simulated phishing tests, just know it's the norm today to do them and use it as part of the education process.
I like to consider phishing a controlled assessment. The company is in control of the hack. Let's get people more aware of the risk before a hacker comes in and launches a phishing attack. One thing about awareness and training, I like to use the word awareness. Training is teaching a body of knowledge to an individual. Awareness is changing the culture. You want to change the culture of your organization so people are more aware of the risk today. Kevin, what do you see as some remediation steps?
Sure. So I think what's interesting about all of this conversation is that you can put together that framework of people, process, and technology and look at all three with respect to something as finite as phishing. Awareness is a necessary step. You should invest in it. It makes sense. My organization works with many Fortune 500s. All of them have phishing awareness training programs. But think about something that was shared in the hack that we just heard about. You had an organization where one person clicked on something and fell for it. Technology can help here. You can reinforce things that you do from an awareness perspective with advanced technology. A number of questions came up in the last session about the role of artificial intelligence and its corollary machine learning with respect to cybersecurity. We can look at things like that email that says, this is a Dunkin' Donuts free donut offer, or I need your W-2s because it's tax time and we're doing a payroll study. That kind of analysis can be done not just from the perspective, although it's a meaningful start, this is an external email, but also, is this an email from an employee sending from, say, their personal Gmail account? How often have we seen mail from that employee's Gmail account? Is this really it? Or, as we see from many of our clients that we work with, is this an impersonation of a vendor in your supply chain where maybe they've been compromised and now they're looking to update a lockbox or a wire transfer address? Technology can overlay what you're doing from a process perspective. Please voice verify. Please make sure you don't send out that kind of information, with additional ways of reinforcing and underscoring the awareness investments you make. Everybody hears don't click on a link. Wouldn't it be better if we said that every link that you get in every email is automatically sandboxed and safe? You can't be compromised by clicking on that link. If we train people to hover their mouse cursor over it, what do you do in an increasingly mobile world when somebody doesn't have a mouse cursor? They're on their phone, they're in an airport, it's the CEO. This is where you start to look at technology being a complement to the compliance-related and training-related things that you invest in at the very start of that process.
I think that's a very good point, because 54% of phishing emails come from a mobile device. You know, I'm from New York. Think about how many people are on a platform looking and just with their thumb clicking on things just because they're in a hurry or walking down Madison Avenue. That's a very good point. Judy?
So I want to step it back a little bit and talk about cybersecurity as part of an enterprise risk management strategy. So many times the organization may have tools already in place that are coupled with your business resiliency and disaster recovery plans that also can be pivoted to be helpful for thinking about cybersecurity and responding to cybersecurity. Companies are being hacked all the time, and more we're seeing that you're being judged in the court of public opinion by the civil litigants, by the regulators, by your clients, and by your employees, not on the fact that the breach occurred, but on how you handle it. And part of how you handle it is what have you done ahead of time in terms of basic cybersecurity hygiene, complex passwords, encryption, scans, vulnerability checks, and definitely updates as regularly as feasible. But also, how quickly do the business leaders understand the messaging and what they need to do? One of the things that happened in the Equifax breach, which was a major breach, millions of people's highly personal and confidential personal information compromised, and the CEO's message was, "This is a bad day for Equifax." That's not the best message, right? You want to talk about your clients, your customers, your concerns. At the same time, of course, you have I'll put on my lawyer hat for a moment. Oh no, what does this mean? How many people are suing me if I say I'm sorry? But at the same time, you have to own up to it and take accountability. And the ability to balance that very difficult challenge of communicating, coming out quickly, because that's important, but having enough facts as quickly as you can, and being comfortable that you might have to say something publicly or to your clients before you have all the facts, or to your board, what do you report, when and how? A lot of that comes by preparing. You should do tabletop exercises. You should meet with the stakeholders in the company with outside advisors to say, what do we care most about? What's our most important data? Where are our biggest vulnerabilities? What are we doing to fix them so we can hopefully prevent the attack? Or when that worst day comes, we can stand up and say, here's what we've done, here's what we know, and what we're doing to fix it. Because that's I've worked with companies of all different sizes, from very large publicly traded companies to small startups, private, nonprofits. The bottom line always is we care about trust, we care about reputation. And how do you manage that in the cybersecurity space comes with preparing, with basic cyber hygiene, and prioritizing your risk based on the resources you have. But it takes a leadership approach, it takes an interdisciplinary approach within the organization, and you have to talk about it now before you're in the heat of the crisis.
Thank you. So some of the things that we heard about, what can you take back to your organizations and implement, either through yourselves, or a peer may have someone who can help you, or reaching out to a third party. There's a lot of us out there that can help. Some of the things, have a backup, but more importantly, test your backup. That's critical. It's all about the patch, no treble. It's all about the patch, no treble. I think we're going to make a new song after this. Instead of "It's all about the bass," patches are critical. As a cybersecurity practitioner, you can't stress that enough. Cybersecurity insurance. Andrea is a firm believer. We're all believers of cyber insurance, something to think about. Social engineering, working with your human firewall, and bringing a solution like no before in so you can do a controlled assessment or a controlled hack. Raising the level of awareness. What Kevin is saying is technology, enable technology. There are a lot of technologies out there, there are a lot of noise, but with some due diligence, you're going to find the right solution to help you. And how do you handle a breach? That's after the fact. More importantly, do a self-assessment today. See where you stand and what areas of weakness you have to shore up. So I think they were really great ideas. We have a lot of questions coming in, thank you. I've just been informed we're going to go another 3 hours in this panel, so you guys will have to wait, so thanks very much. But we are going to enjoy another polling question. So for those 82 that answered the first one, I appreciate it. Let's get some input into the next one. Let's see, these are the questions. We'll get the second polling question up there. It's going to be a two-parter. The first part is going to say, have you implemented a cybersecurity plan? There, in the end, you can see right in front of you with the monitor panel, the answers coming in.
Hey, so Karl?
Yes.
I was listening to you talk about coming together, people, processes, and systems. And a big part of any leader's job is to understand the risk and mitigate the risk so that the business can thrive and make money. And so that's a piece, of my job that I didn't do well during this process. And when I think back to a critical mistake that I made, and me personally, was this trade-off between user convenience and security. And so, I was born and raised a salesperson, and when our folks are in front of our customers, we want it to be easy and fast and accurate. We want them to be nimble. And I didn't fully understand what I was actually giving up. So when I look down at this poll question and I see that 63% haven't implemented a security system, I know you're going to be sitting in rooms where you're going to be talking about user convenience, and the users are going to be vociferous in their attempt to not take away anything that's convenient for them. And that's where we were. We had to have admin rights. At least one user in every building had to have admin rights because of all the things they needed to do. After our breach, we took admin rights away in a week and a half, and we never heard a peep. So please, just make sure you do your diligence around the stakeholders' claims of what they need.
Andrea, I think that's a critically important point, because a lot of companies, we're all struggling with the convenience, the security, the speed, the mobility, and how do we make it safe? And it's important as an organization to think about those and prioritize your risk. Make sure that you're not keeping more information than you need. What you are keeping that you care about, you're encrypting. If you're giving certain access credentials, that they're limited to just what that person needs for the specific function, or cutting them off where they don't need them. And those are the really important things, proactively thinking about this within the organization, throughout the organization, so that you can really reduce your risk profile so that when something does occur, it's smaller and hopefully insured.
So just 3 thoughts on that. Some truisms in cybersecurity. No system is unhackable. Doesn't exist. I think one of the questions, which we'll probably get to, is about that. But anything that you have, whether it's that safe with multiple locks or it's an advanced technology system you've deployed, can be breached. There's no silver bullet. You can't buy something that makes you secure. You can increase your resiliency to attack, and you can make it more difficult for an attacker to get in. But the third point, and the one that, if you don't live in this world, is probably the most difficult to perceive. The attacker today is not what you think of if you started paying attention to cybersecurity 20 years ago or even 10 years ago. When I got started, when I was a gray hat hacker way back when, you had folks who were literally sitting in basements trying to break into systems because it was amusing or interesting. It was an academic challenge. Today's hacker is most likely a well-funded criminal with an economic motive and the means to bypass whatever security you have purchased on the open market. So, what you're looking for, to the point that was just raised, is a defense in depth strategy to make yourself more secure and to reduce your time to remediation in the circumstance in which you were breached. If you take those three truisms and put them together, now you start to see why ostensibly companies that might even be competitors on the market are saying the same things to you, which is you should do both. You should have robust strategies for incident response, and you should trade off between convenience and security in a way that meaningfully impacts your organization's posture and doesn't drive your users into less secure behavior as a result of making their life too difficult.
Great, thank you. Thank you for the audience participation. 69% of you I want to address now. So you say you've implemented a cybersecurity plan. The second part of this is, based on what you've heard today, do you think that plan is adequate? If you could respond to that when the polling question comes up. Oh, we're off to a, oh. Okay.
Just 4 and 4.
Quickly, it was 50-50. So this is really geared for the 69% of you that said you have a plan, or those of you who may not have answered, you can answer as well. Because if you don't have a plan, it's not adequate. Let's just say that. So this is interesting. 3/4 of you are saying that your plan is not accurate. And if we really did have 3 more hours, that would be great, because I'd love to, and we would love to know what part of the plan isn't resonating in your organization. But they're the results, and that's the last polling question we have. And thank you very much for that participation, because it's telling. We really have a lot of questions, and we appreciate that. And we only have about 9 minutes left, so we're going to pick a couple. Roger, succinctly, what is social engineering?
Someone's trying to con you, oftentimes from email. Typically, they're trying to con you into performing an action, opening a document, clicking an executable, clicking on a link, or giving up login credentials or information from the company, like W-2 or do a wire transfer. So it's a con to get you to do an action that is against your own company's self-interest. And it can also happen on cell phones, SMS messaging, social media, phone calls are increasing, so it's a con.
Okay, great, thank you. This is for Andrea. I love this question. What is the best strategy to communicate with or scare your teams about the risks that Andrea spoke of?
So within Merchants Metals, is that how that question reads?
Well, no, just in general. This is just in general.
Well, I would just tell you, we've taken an approach of complete 100% transparency with every constituency, certainly our ownership, our supply chain, our employees, and we've worked to educate them. Certainly we do spear phishing tests on our folks, and we report back, hey, 78 of you are still clicking on these things. But I think one of the benefits that have, if there are any benefits that come of it, is we're actually training our customers on it. We have been fully transparent with our customers. They install fence for a living. They're on QuickBooks. They have a website. And we've had some incidents where they've wired money to a bad actor. And so we're trying to be out there, talk about it, understand the vulnerabilities, fall on our sword, if you will. But I think the more people that get educated about this, the better. And I can't say enough about the IT security people we've met and partnered with. When I look under the IT hood, I'm still not going to know what's going on, because that's not my job. But I am now informed by great partners who are helping us navigate this. And I think that's really important. But our approach has been transparency. We've had counsel caution us about that. Because there can be some liability associated with that. But I mean, if we're not talking about it, we're not going to be able to fight this. And we have to fight it. It's got to be the #1 risk in business today.
Great. Does anyone have any ideas on how to scare management or the PE firm or the board on why cybersecurity should be taken seriously?
Well, I think it's very important that the boards are getting regular briefings and updates on cybersecurity, and also senior management. And it's pretty easy to do from the headlines and from examples of other companies in the industry and generally, and a lot of lessons learned. And that serves 2 purposes. One, it hopefully scares them so that they're committed to giving the necessary resources. And 2, when the incident occurs, you have a better story to tell, again, whether to the regulators or the civil litigants. And we saw this very much with the Wyndham breach, which goes back a few years. But, excuse me, there and in other cases, there have been lawsuits against the board of directors. And they were able to show that they had sufficient board briefings. They took steps in place through internal and external consultants and advisors to try to shore up the organization's cybersecurity. And that helped them defeat the shareholder class action because they had a track record of trying to adjust this. So that's another way to pique the board's interest, to say, it can help you later, but it's also good to try to prevent the now.
Right. And I think, when you say the word scare and educate, they can almost go hand in hand. Having a peer like Andrea on the table or on the panel today, who has really talked about all the troubles that they went through and the cost, is an ally of yours to bring the message back to your organization. A lot of people ask this question. I think it's a one-word answer. Kevin, this is for you. Is there truly a software package that cannot be hacked on the market today?
We've already addressed this. No, there's not.
I know. I just wanted to bring it up because a lot of people are asking that. Roger, how do you train your teams to recognize social engineering or phishing attacks?
So we talked about the simulated phishing, but the idea is that intelligence, this is a big deal, is that how smart you are does not determine whether you're successfully going to be phished or not. There is Nobel Physics Prize winners, doctors, lawyers. It's literally the awareness thing. Are you aware of the wire transfer fraud or the W-2 fraud or whatever it happens to be? If you educate people about the types of schemes that are out there, they're far more likely to be able to fight it.
Okay, thank you. A question I have, and I get asked a lot by clients, is when do you bring in legal counsel? That's just such an open-ended question.
Now, before the incident, because you want to address the poll that was just up there with all the sense that the plan is inadequate. Part of the work that can be done proactively is making sure that the plan addresses the different risk within the organization, has the right people calling each within the organization, not just from the tech perspective, but through the senior leadership and the concerns about escalation. When this executive team needs to know, when does the board need to know, working through that, making sure the right people in the organization know how to talk to each other about these issues and privacy issues, because some of the data breach laws require a turnaround within 72 hours, which is really quick when you're trying to figure out what even happened and who was impacted. So having the legal partnership ahead of time can help to make it quicker, and then always balancing the business and the law and the technology, the privacy concerns, the security concerns in a sensible way for the organization to properly manage the risk.
Now, I was reading the next question. Did you mention attorney-client privilege?
Oh, thanks, yes. So that's another benefit, and particularly with regard to a security incident and even with a vulnerability assessment. To the extent that you have legal counsel engaged to help you with this, and sometimes the external forensic advisors are retained through legal counsel, you have a much better positioning for preserving attorney-client privilege. So that when the risk assessment says, oh my gosh, we've done nothing and we've failed in these 10 different ways, that's better being on the attorney's file, attorney-client privilege, than on your own file or on an outside vendor who's not an attorney. So having legal counsel very early in the risk assessment stage, the planning stage, and then of course through the incident response can be incredibly helpful for the protection as well as sort of quarterbacking the communications, what you can and can't say, and the risk assessments.
Yeah, that's what people always ask about. We have a lot of questions. We will be able to answer these on the app, either during or after the summit, so you can refer back and look at those. The last question we're going to ask, and we'll go Judy down, is what are the must-haves to protect your IT environment? Now let's think about people, process, and technology when we answer that.
I think that you need a interdisciplinary plan in the organization that's going to address minimizing the tech risk, but also making sure that you're not just putting bells and whistles on the system. You have governance procedures in place to read those red flags, because that's where companies also will get burned in just not properly responding to the flags, and knowing that you can get it throughout the organization to the end so that it's a successful incident response to discuss, as opposed to a potential company-ending disaster.
So imagine that you're sitting in the shoes on the executive side of a breach. It's just happened. How do you respond? If you're not testing that plan in the real world, whether that's your backups or it's your actual incident response, and you're not measuring, and then using the measurement results as your way of talking about it at the board level, how quickly can we respond to a threat once it actually gets into our environment? That plan's not worth anything. So I think that the thing that you look for are metrics around efficacy and response time.
I agree with everything the board has said today. Fantastic group up here. But I'll add one more thing, is make sure that your end users don't reuse passwords, especially your corporate password on other websites. The average person has 5 to 7 passwords that they use across 100 websites. And those websites will get, a few of those websites will be compromised each year and the password's stolen. So make sure people are make sure that they use unique passwords on your corporate website and other websites related to your business, and start to move to multi-factor, 2-factor authentication when you can, because it helps decrease the risk as well.
And again, I would just add, line up great partners. This is clearly something that you're going to need help doing with experts. So, great insurance carrier, great attorney, great cybersecurity company. The things that protect you are the things that have to be executed every day. It has to work every day. You can't skip a day. It has to be precise. Almost by definition, it's something that should be outsourced. But that's your choice. But great partners.
So just in recapping what you just said, your cybersecurity program is a living, breathing program. It should never stay stagnant, because threats change, technology changes, the level of tolerance, the risk tolerance of the senior stakeholders in the organization can change. So it really has to be a living document every single day. Well, we have the flashing red light. We're out of time. We thank you very much for your participation. It really is beneficial when you answer the polls. And if you could show your appreciation to one of the finest panels at this summit today.
Thank you.